We're coming up on the midterms. Biden just came out and said, okay, well, I got one for you. Vote for me. Vote for Democrats because we'll give you student loan forgiveness or something. But in this year, last of all, it was just the other day, Anna Paulina Luna won her primary in Florida's 13th congressional district. She's another far-right Latina. She's likely headed to Congress because it's a very heavy Republican district. You've got the media calling Mayra Flores a far-right Latina. Same for Cassie Garcia. Same for Monica de la Cruz. There's an unprecedented number of black and Hispanic women running as conservative Republicans. You've got Laverne Spicer. You've got Philonise White. You've got Tamika Hamilton, Asia Smith. The list can go on and on. How does the media get away? For all their talk about representation and equity and glass ceilings, how do they get away without highlighting any of these women?
Well, they highlight them in a slanderous way because that slanderous way serves their narrative. It's unfortunate that we are seeing, well, it's fortunate that we're seeing a resurgence, I think, of conservative minority interest in politics, because if we look at statistics, a lot of minorities are actually intrinsically conservative, especially Hispanics, if you look at their social positions, especially Black Americans. In fact, Black Americans are actually quite socially conservative. They've just been misled by the Democratic Party. But that doesn't fit the narrative, the idea that is being sold in corporations, universities, and media boardrooms around the country, that there are marginalized groups that require a certain set of principles and ideas to further their lot, which the left thinks that they are the unique champions of. So anyone that deviates from that particular set of a narrative is deemed an enemy. They're deemed far right. And really, no one should take these phrases seriously. When you hear the term far right, that should almost compel you to dismiss whoever said that, because these terms are the equivalent of buzzwords used to kill any investigation, any inquiry into someone's position. It's an ad hominem attack of the highest order. So in my opinion, when you hear the word far right or whatever, just dismiss that. Only listen to substantive critiques of people.
Well, this is what I find interesting. The assumption, now I have always argued that the Democrats and the media are trying to box us into a European, a 20th century European model of right and left, right? You look at the communists and the National Socialists in Germany, really, they would both be on the left they didn't believe in constitutional governance or freedom of speech or right to keep and bear arms or any of that stuff. There's no constitutional conservative in there. Yes, the National Socialist German Workers' Party was worse than the communists for obvious reasons, but really their prescription of governance is left-wing. That being said, if the assumption is that far right means middle-aged white people who don't like black and brown people, how can Mayra Flores, who was born in Mexico, then be far right?
Yeah, so what I think far right means, it simply means someone who the powers that be don't like very much and therefore want to slander their political positions. Really, it's not a useful phrase because, again, the political spectrum shifts and changes all the time. And there's even conversation in some circles as to if the political spectrum is a reliable metric of assessing someone's values or not. For many reasons, it can be, but for other reasons, it probably is not, especially when those who control the political spectrum are the intelligentsia who have a very particular political viewpoint. So what would be far right in America or far right in Europe would be reversed in different countries. Obviously, a far-right British person may actually be closer to the left in America because European conservatives tend to be anti-gun. They tend to be pro-socialized healthcare, so we have to add nuance to these kind of phrases. But in this media environment, there is no nuance. They're expecting you to associate people they don't like with disgust, with pure disgust and emotion, and not have an intelligible assessment of their opinions. This is why you get Mayra Flores being called far right. This is why you get a bunch of other people being called far right, because it's not about the content of their positions. It's about the disgust factor that narrative agents are trying to invoke in the good people of America.
I think it's funny how the media operates. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won her primary against Joe Crowley, I mean, the entire media stopped. It was like the big record scratched, and they were like, wow, we got to put her on morning, noon, and night. You just had Anna Paulina Luna win her primary in Florida 13. Nothing. Not a single bit of coverage. Her background is no different than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's. Same thing for Catalina Lauf, same thing for Cassie Garcia or Monica de la Cruz. And then you take candidates like Laverne Spicer in Florida. She's a black woman running as a conservative in South Florida. Came on this program, had one of the best ideas I've heard in a long time. She said, I would like to introduce a bill that says you can only vote on bills every 10 pages, meaning you can only vote every 10 pages. You got to have read it, then you vote on it, you keep going. So she's like, these 1,000-page bills, everybody would have to vote every 10 pages. I was like, I like it. I like that a lot. You can't pass a 2,000-page bill that nobody read, and then you pass it to find out what's in it. You go every 10 pages, and then you vote again.
Brilliant. Right. Because the Pelosi strategy is unfortunately a strategy that's been adopted by a lot of politicians. We got to pass it to find out what is in it. And the truth is, a lot of these politicians have a idea of what's in it, but that idea is fed to them by lobbyists and special interest. So they may not have a good idea whatsoever. But yes, no, I think that'd be wonderful. Congress was never conceived to be this lumbering bureaucracy that just gives the administrative state and all these kind of agencies all these powers and privileges. Congress was always meant to be a safeguard for A, the Constitution, and B, the rights of the American citizen, and also to keep in check any other level of government that would seek to transgress against those sacred rights. But Congress right now, with whether it be the size of the bills, whether it be with the level of bribery in Congress, whether it be with the level of corruption in Congress, regardless of what it might be, has completely and utterly deviated from its initial principles. And our founders had an idea this would happen. Our founders knew that factionalism and political parties would actually be a threat to our republic. They didn't support having all of these parties, although in the era of the founders, there were a lot of parties. This is how things evolved, but they still had a lot of consternation about it. And I think that those few hundred-year, warnings from them about the passions of faction, as Madison would say in the Federalist Papers, still bear much heed today.
What do you make of, 2016, the Democrats said to the FBI, how dare you investigate Hillary Clinton? Now they're like, wow, we love the FBI because they're investigating Trump. We were defund the police, but now we want 87,000 new IRS agents. If it weren't for the media just forgetting their previous positions on these things, the rest of the country would be going, wait, you can't say defund the police and then hire 87,000 law enforcement officers for the IRS.
Exactly. Yeah, so there is a distinction between the corporate Democratic Party and what they want, and the grassroots Democratic Party and what they want. I would call them the progressive movement. They have been the movement that has been bubbling up since the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, who have kind of pushed forth the birth of the administrative state. They've pushed forth a lot of government intrusion into our lives, the New Deal. And those people are the ones pushing for the defund the police idea. But it is very interesting that a lot of those same people who have a very negative relationship with the FBI and all these other agencies are now in support of it when it penalizes one of their political opponents. There's not much to be said for principle consistency in today's politics because it doesn't really pay very well. It doesn't have a good payoff, although it pays off morally but not politically. The truth is the FBI committed one of the greatest atrocities that I think we have seen in modern American history, at least in the 21st century, and they did so in broad daylight. They are attempting to destroy a former president who the current administration dislikes, who has had every right to have what he had, who was going through the proper legal processes to keep what he had, and they decided to circumvent all of that, forget the rule of law, forget our system of governance. We're going to unilaterally make a decision about President Trump and then all of a sudden do that kind of stuff. I think it's high time that Americans either reform or at least get rid of the FBI and the entire administrative state, in my opinion. It has gone completely out of control.